While we're going back to the well, there's a new Robert Reich video.
Corporations are bringing back child labor in America, and some Republicans want to make it easier for them to get away with it. Since 2015, child labor violations have risen nearly 300%.
Once again, it's infuriating how much Reich sucks at actually sourcing his claims. He just says Economic Policy Institute, so I was left to search their site. I found a pair of articles, a press release and a report, that asserted that these violations were on the rise and that Republicans were weakening child labor protections. Neither actually bothered supporting the initial assertion. The report, by the way, has the same chart he displays, so I'm assuming I found it, although it's possible it's been used more than once. The report mentioned findings reported by the Department of Labor in February, without linking to it. Geez, people, we're 30 years into the World Wide Web. The whole point of this was that if you reference something, you should link to it. This report doesn't seem to be anywhere on the DOL website that I could find, but other news stories about it say that the DOL mentioned it on 60 Minutes. Is this sounding less and less credible to you? Anyway, what I was able to find out is, as usual, they talk about child labor because they want you to think about little kids laboring in factories when, once again, we're actually talking about teenage labor. Kids 14 and up. But if they said teenagers are working, that doesn't sound scary. Maybe we should counter child labor with employment opportunities for teens. It's more accurate anyway. The report mentions things like razor-sharp saws and other high-risk equipment, leaving the reader with the impression they're working directly around saws and blades and scary things without mentioning any of the things that have been invented in the past few decades to make all this equipment incredibly safe. The worst, in fact, the only injury I could find them mentioning is someone who got caustic burns from cleaning chemicals, without saying anything about how severe they were. I have a feeling if they'd been anything like second or even third degree burns that required emergency treatment, they would certainly have mentioned that. The fact is that things like agricultural work, meat slicing at the deli, all sorts of jobs that have been the focus of teenage labor restrictions because of their dangers just aren't all that dangerous anymore. Yeah, you can find the odd injury just like you can at any job because nothing's 100% safe. But again, if there were anything significant, you could bet they would have been leading with it. It's just another case where they appear to want to settle for nothing less than absolutely zero accidents ever without considering the harms of their policy.
Why on earth is this happening? The answer is frighteningly simple. Greed.
And here's his nice little drop-in answer for everything. It's his phlogiston. He wants you to think that it's the greed of corporations, but think about it. Are corporations grabbing these teenagers off the streets and forcing them to work? No! It has to be done at least with the okay of the parents. So is he saying that all these people are just horrible parents who don't care about their kids and hand them over to some corporation to mistreat? Or maybe, just maybe, teens want to work. I'm a parent, and I can tell you at that age they want to work a job and get some money to spend. My daughter was actually upset when I told her she wasn't able to legally get a job until she's 14, and that much of what she wanted to do was prohibited to those under 18. Teenagers are more competent than you think. Most 13-year-olds are capable of learning to competently handle a firearm. Mention that to lefty nitwits like Reich and they'll lose their shit, but it's true. And I'm someone who worked on the family farm, which is an exception to these laws. I was baling hay and working the sawmill at an age that would make them freak out. But it's great to be able to work at that age, learn skills, experience the value of hard work, and develop a work ethic. This is all made to tug on your heartstrings because if they told you the truth, you'd wonder what's wrong with them.
Employers have been having difficulty finding the workers they need at the wages they're willing to pay.
You mean at the wages they're required to pay by the psychopathic minimum wages people like you keep foisting on them? Maybe if you drop them, they'd be able to find enough adult labor. Did that ever occur to you?
And rather than reduce their profits by paying adult workers more, employers are exploiting children.
The labor shortage is because of minimum wage. I got a whole playlist showing that. Raising wages would make the problem worse for these workers because they wouldn't be able to generate enough wealth to make it so they can afford to pay them. Reich is blaming the exact opposite effect.
The sad fact of the matter is that many of the children who are being exploited are considered to be them rather than us because they're disproportionately poor and immigrant.
Oh, shut up and stop projecting, you elitist swine! They're being given opportunities. Opportunities that people like you have worked for decades to deny them. It's also been repeatedly shown that one reason why crime is so rampant among teens of lower socioeconomic neighborhoods is because they don't have jobs available to them, so they can't earn money legitimately, they don't learn responsibility, and they turn to crime as a means of both making money and finding something to do with their time.
They need the money. This makes them easily exploitable.
Yeah, so maybe you shouldn't have imposed all your sociopathic labor restrictions to put them in that position in the first place. Note that rich kids aren't exactly wanting for jobs. They can demand the higher wage and also get the kind of jobs that let them work in greater comfort and safety. In the name of safety, and with the think of the children fallacy, I'm officially naming that, Reich and his rich elite cronies destroy jobs and the lives of poor teens solely for the benefit of his own class and the power they wield.
It's a perfect storm that's resulting in vulnerable children taking on some of the most brutal jobs in America.
If it's a perfect storm, then you're tempestuous.
Folks, we've seen this before. Reformers fought to establish the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 for a reason: to curb the grotesque child labor seen during America's first Gilded Age.
Do I really need to debunk this lie again? The free market had already eliminated child labor. How many times do I have to show that? Again, it was teenage labor they were against because it provided competition for their precious labor unions.
Arkansas will no longer require 14 and 15-year-olds to get a work permit before taking a job, a process that verified their age and required permission from a parent or guardian.
Outright lie! This is why he doesn't properly cite his sources. He's talking about the Youth Hiring Act of 2023. I'm linking to it below. 14 and 15-year-olds no longer have to get permission from the Department of Labor. But it's no surprise that former Labor Secretary Reich considers them to be the legitimate parents. The bill restores decision-making to parents. The only thing parental permission has to do with it is that previously the DOL had to get parental permission to issue the permit, a permit they're now no longer required to get. That's not the same thing. Parental permission is still required. It just doesn't go through the DOL. Do you see the crafty way this narcissist lies?
A bill in Ohio would let children work later on school nights.
So what?
Minnesota Republicans are pushing to let 16-year-olds work in construction.
And
in Iowa, 14-year-olds may soon be allowed to take certain jobs in meatpacking plants and operate dangerous machinery.
Not even gonna bother with the other two, and I think you'll understand once you see this next one that we can't trust him with any of them anyway. So let's look at the Iowa bill, since that's the only one he made anything remotely resembling a claim about. He's talking about SF 542, which the governor signed into law. Again, I'm linking to it when he didn't. First of all, it bans all jobs for kids under 14, removing previous exemptions. Second, It added exemptions to workers under 16, including those not legally in school, in a supervised school work program, and part-time students. It specified the occupations they were allowed to work. None of it was meatpacking. The closest it came was allowing kitchen work. It specifically banned them from working in manufacturing, mining, processing, operating power-driven machinery, and all sorts of things. And guess what? Clause 8 of Section 92.8, beginning on page 6 of the bill, says specifically, no person under 18 years of age shall be employed or permitted to work with or without compensation at any of the following work activities or business establishments. Work activities in or about slaughtering and meat packing establishments and rendering plants. It specifically banned what he said it allows! Reich is a liar!
It's all a coordinated campaign to erode national standards, making it even easier for companies to profit off children.
More like making it easier for teenagers to have work, make some extra money, learn responsibility, have a work ethic. Why is Reich against all that? No one with any sense in their heads believes this profit off of children bullshit. He doesn't want them growing and learning. He wants their continued infantilization so they'll be unthinking sheep more easily controlled by his ilk, taxed to death while being forced into labor unions and told it's for their own good.
Across America, we're witnessing a resurgence of cruel capitalism, in which business lobbyists and lawmakers justify their actions by arguing that they're not exploiting the weak and vulnerable, but rather providing jobs for those who need them.
Well, aren't we just so fortunate that we have you to tell us who needs jobs and who doesn't? You authoritarian scum!
So what can stop this madness? First, fund the Department of Labor.
There's a big shocker.
Second, increase fines on companies that break child labor laws.
And not stop and think about why those laws exist in the first place and whether or not they're obsolete.
Third, hold major corporations accountable for their supply chains.
Are you serious? After your blessed government screwed up the supply chains during COVID? Do you see how none of these people will ever accept responsibility for any of the misery and destruction they cause?
It's time to demand that large corporations take responsibility for their contractors.
No, it's time to demand that narcissistic megalomaniacs like you take responsibility for the damage you do to society. So thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe, leave a comment, and go to donate.pagosity.tv to keep me doing what I do. And check out all the great content here, like this video selected just for you.